Today we're talking about EA, and I need you to understand something up front. This isn't just big company gets acquired. This isn't just Wall Street does Wall Street things. This is one of the biggest ownership shifts gaming has ever seen. Electronic Arts or EA agreed to a take-private deal valued at $55 billion, with stockholders receiving $210 per share in cash, led by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund alongside Silver Lake and Affinity Partners. And if the deal closes the way it's secured right now, reporting based on filings says Saudi Arabia's PIF ends up owning about 93.4% of EA. That's not influence, that's not a stake, that is ownership. And what's weird is how quickly the conversation gets flattened into the same handful of lazy takes. Who cares? It's just business. They won't change anything. Stop being political. It's just a culture war. Meanwhile, this is layered drama with something to anger everyone, and the longer you stare at it, the bigger it gets. So today, let's talk about what's actually happening, why it's happening, and what the real knock-on effects could be for games, studios, and players. Now, EA isn't just raising money. EA is going private. That's the key. EA's own press release frames this as a take-private transaction, one they call the largest all-cash sponsor take-private investment. Going private changes incentives. Public companies already chase quarterly optics, but private ownership can mean even more pressure to optimize. And optimize is corporate slang for cut costs, consolidate teams, squeeze margins, focus on the most reliable revenue, reduce risk in creative decision. Not always, but quite often. If you've watched the game industry for even 5 minutes, you know how this goes. Risk goes down, monetization goes up, the middle gets hollowed out. The ownership breakdown is the story. At first, EA announced Buyer Group as a consortium. Fine. But the later ownership breakdown is what makes this insane. Multiple outlets reported that PIF would own 93.4% with Silver Lake around 5.5% and Affinity Partners around 1.1%. So, when people say it's a consortium as if it's some evenly split partnership, nope, it's basically PIF. That matters because it reshapes every don't worry about it argument. The comforting story people want to tell is they're passive investors. Okay? But passive investors don't usually end up owning 93% of the company. And even if they truly are hands-off day-to-day, ownership doesn't need to micromanage to influence outcomes. All it takes is incentives. All it takes is risk tolerance. All it takes is saying we'd rather not deal with the controversy, and suddenly you don't need censorship. You get self-censorship. That's how it happens in real life, quietly. So let's just go back a bit. So why did this deal happen now? This didn't happen because EA is dead. EA is a cash flow machine. Sports title alone makes EA one of the most predictable revenue generators in gaming, and Reuters framed EA's sports portfolio as crucial in a period where the industry was facing a downturn. If you're a massive sovereign wealth fund pushing into entertainment, EA is the kind of assets you buy when you want global brands, recurring revenue, huge live service infrastructure, built-in audiences that complain and still buy. EA doesn't just sell games. EA sells habits. Like an addiction. Yes, right now I'm addicted in Rust, and that's why the deal size is so massive and why it's not crazy to see this as part of a broader push into gaming and entertainment capital. So, creative control versus reality. After the announcement, EA leadership told employees it would maintain creative control. Maintain creative control, huh? Under the new ownership. This was widely reported, including by Polygon and GameFile based on internal comms or FAQ framing. And here's the thing, every accusation says that. Every single time. Nothing will change. Culture stays the same. Creative independence. That's the script. The real test is what happens when there's pressure. And with this deal, pressure is definitely guaranteed. Now, the second flashpoint is LGBTQ plus representation and content anxiety. Now, we get to the part where people start pretending concerns are made up. They're not. Forbes explicitly covered worries that LGBTQ plus representation could be impacted under Saudi-backed ownership, pointing to how EA franchises like The Sims and Dragon Age adjacent conversation in the ecosystem have been meaningful for representation. And multiple pieces of reporting cite employee and community concern. You also had coverage around EA employees voicing worries and the broader internal unease, including industry adjacent reporting and aggregation of employee sentiment. Now, to be careful and accurate, no one can prove today that the new owners will strip out content tomorrow. What we can say is concerns are already being raised, it's a predictable pressure point because it's politically sensitive, and EA has franchises where representation isn't a small side thing, it's central to the community identity. This is where the layered drama comes in. If EA ever reduces representation, a huge chunk of the audience will revolt. If EA doesn't reduce representation, the outrage economy accounts will farm it anyway. Either way, the company gets pulled into cultural conflict, and that tension alone can create chilling effects. Now, the third flashpoint is politics and regulatory scrutiny. This isn't just Twitter discourse. US Senators Richard Blumenthal and Elizabeth Warren publicly raised alarms and called for scrutiny over foreign influence, noting the buyer group and the Saudi fund's dominant role. There are also Senate-hosted PDF letters publicly posted that outline concerns, requests for information, and a push for review. That matters because it tells you something. This deal isn't just going to close quietly with zero questions. It's big enough and politically sensitive enough that it becomes a regulatory and reputational event. And that kind of scrutiny can influence corporate behavior all by itself. When the spotlight is bright, companies become risk-averse. When companies become risk-averse, creativity gets filtered. Now the fourth flashpoint, the private buyout playbook. Let's talk about the part that affects literally everyone, regardless of ideology. What happens to the studios? What happens to the jobs? What happens to the projects that aren't printing money every week? EA going private under a massive buyout structure creates pressure to protect returns, and that typically means focusing on the sure things, the one that prints money. And EA's sure things are obvious: sports, live service, monetizable ecosystems, recurring spending, which is why some worker groups and developers pushed back and called for scrutiny, with reporting noting petitions and labor concerns around job protections and studio stability. And you don't need a conspiracy theory to predict where that can go. You just need to understand incentives. If you're holding 93% of the company and you're trying to make sure this huge bet performs, you don't want chaos. You want predictability. Predictability in AAA often looks like fewer weird experiments, fewer risky single-player projects, more safe sequels, more monetization layers, more engagement features, basically, more EA. Which is the funniest possible outcome because the entire internet already hates EA for being EA. So, who gets mad? Everyone, literally everyone. This is why the story is radioactive. Here's the bingo card. Gamers who hate monetization, this will get worse. Gamers who don't care about politics, stop talking about politics. LGBTQ plus fans, don't touch our representation. Outrage accounts, they're pushing politics. Employees, are we getting cut? Politicians or regulators, foreign influence. Investors or media, does it close? Does it get blocked? Every angle has conflict. That's why it's weird seeing people act like it's just a normal accusation headline. What this could mean for EA's biggest franchises. Now let's talk consequences in a way that's honest. I'm not going to sit here and claim I can see the future because I don't. But I can tell you the zones where pressure tends to show up first. Number 1 is The Sims. This is where cultural identity and representation are the most visible. And it's why people immediately brought up diversity concerns. If anything changes here, even slightly, people will definitely notice instantly. Number 2 is EA Sports, FC, Madden, etc. This is where the money is stable. Stable money becomes the center of gravity. That tends to shift resources and priorities across the company. Number 3 is Battlefield. Big budgets, huge expectations, historically uneven launches. In a risk-averse environment, Battlefield becomes either a crown jewel or a cost center. Number 4 is Apex or live service ecosystems. Live service thrives when the company's incentives is recurring spend. Private ownership pressures can intensify that logic. This isn't Saudi ownership equals instant content changes. This is new incentives equals new priorities. And priorities shape games. So the most important thing, this normalizes sovereign wealth ownership of gaming. This is the real long-term consequences. Gaming is not a niche hobby anymore. It's cultural infrastructure. It's attention at planetary scale, so it was always going to become a battleground for capital. EA being taken private in a Saudi-led buyout isn't just a one-off headline. It's a signal. Gaming is now an asset class powerful enough that sovereign wealth funds want control, not just exposure. And if this becomes normal, you're going to see more deals like this. Not necessarily from the same country, but from the capital with agendas, preferences, and risk tolerance that aren't rooted in the culture of games. That's the uncomfortable truth. So, yeah. EA being bought in a Saudi-led $55 billion take private is not a small story, and the reported 93.4% ownership position makes it one of the most consequential ownership shifts in gaming history. Now, this is what I want to hear from you. What do you think changes first if the deal closes? Monetization, studio structure, franchise focus, representation, or genuinely nothing? Drop your takes in the comments. If you want more gaming industry breakdowns like this, where we actually follow the receipts, subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one.